It turns out that forever homes have an expiration date. Exactly 1 year after signing the deed, here we are, taking pictures of our favorite pieces for the estate sale, wondering how we'll ever find home again. To find the piece we were missing while living in Trump's America, we let go of everything and spent 3 years immersed in the vibrant complexity of Mexico. It was a journey that challenged us and changed us, but eventually, that small piece of paradise had to come to an end. Now, back in the heart of the Midwest, we are taking those lessons and applying them to a blank canvas, building a new version of home from scratch.
Upon return to the States, I needed a place to stay. And one of my colleagues has a family member here in Dayton who rents out Airbnbs. And lo and behold, it was a historical property that was just like our house in Salisbury. And I walked in, I was like, really, Lord, pocket doors? Really? I left pocket doors and I'm back. And I have pocket doors. It was so uncanny. We do like the historical fit, the archways, the imperfections of a 100-year-old dwelling.
But it did kind of bring up some old memories of being in that sort of large historical house with, my wife loves to talk about the pocket doors. It had the pocket doors. But it definitely felt like, when you came home, you were coming home in a way, even though it wasn't perfect and it wasn't necessarily the way that we wanted a house to be. You could still kind of appreciate the space and the neighborhood, and being on a couple of streets with just historic houses all over the place, and just felt like we were back in our old house in Salisbury. So it felt like a homecoming in some ways. I guess probably maybe that hit a little bit harder to do because we were only in our forever home for like a year, and then we ended up moving to Mexico. So we really got to enjoy that for only a small amount of time, not for the, decades we had planned to be there. So being able to come back to America into a place that felt a little bit closer to that, I think was like a nice warm feeling to kind of come home to. And probably also helped just to trigger us into thinking again about, having another large historical home.
In the beginning of our journey, and I think Chris was the same way, like we sort of kind of wanted a do-over. So we were looking for a house. And then we flip-flopped and we started looking at cute condos in the city. It's like, okay, forget the house, let's do a condo.
At the same time, we were also looking at, do we want to take care of a larger house? Because we know there's a certain amount of weight that comes with that. You got to cut the grass and you got to go, take care of the gutters and all the other things that come around with a large house. So we're looking at condos at the same time. So we did kind of go back and forth between, a downtown condo, which has that walkability that we're looking for, but also like, hey, there's an opportunity to have that larger historical house.
One of the draws to Dayton, the housing market is wide open. And we used to say in Mexico, like, you can live how you want to live. And it's sort of kind of the same thing here. If you have, a $800 budget, then you can still get, a cute apartment for $800. And if your budget is $3,000, it was really great to have those options, cute condo in walking distance to, everything downtown, or go a couple of blocks up and you can have a historical home, or high-rise apartment. Yeah, it has a lot of options, and we were pleasantly surprised about that.
I think coming out of Mexico, we had a couple different things that we wanted to accomplish with the house. Definitely getting that sort of downtown environment, close to things, make it walkable, was a big thing that we kind of gained while we were in Mexico. We want to kind of replicate to some extent while we were here, which meant for us, basically living downtown was probably the best option. And then again, coming into this larger home started triggering us again, like, hey, maybe we want another historical home. Because we're looking around Dayton and historical homes are, affordable. Literally the house we were in, I think 2 doors down, there was a house for rent. And it was 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, 2,000, 3,000 square feet, big old house. And I think the rent was maybe $1,400 a month. But then you start looking at that house and it's like, man, that's kind of like really inexpensive for what it is. You know what I mean? We had a house in North Carolina that, you know, the mortgage was twice that, and it probably wasn't as big. It might have been a little bit smaller than that house. It's like it starts getting the wheels turning of like, okay, I'm thinking I'm going to come here and be, you know, extra slim, and like we're going to spend $800 a month on something and, you know, stack our cash, and you want to be like really responsible because you can in this particular city at the cost of living. But then you also think about, you know, I can still be at a lower cost of living and actually have a little bit of something that I want. So I think that kind of opened up the door for us to say, hey, let's start looking at maybe some places that aren't $800 a month and aren't one bedroom.
I think we changed our minds. I changed my mind about living in another big house when we started really crunching numbers. The nicer homes that were in our price range or that we wanted to spend, right, they were further away from the city. So we wanted to come closer in. So then the house gets smaller the closer you get to the city, and it gets bigger the further away you get from the city. And as you're doing the sliding scale thing, the price range, the house gets smaller as you get closer, and you end up spending the same amount if you know, and it's just,
So part of what we see here in this, you know, market as far as larger historical homes are big houses that some people have renovated and renovated just enough. Every once in a while you'll see somebody that like really does it right. But that house will be so expensive, it's just sitting on the market and nobody can kind of come in and wants to like pay that price for it. So I think we got lucky to like be in a house that is a older historical home, not necessarily the biggest house as a whole. We got the first floor, but the landlord really like made sure to like put in decent appliances and decent flooring and, you know, do a halfway decent painting and like actually put a little bit of love and care into what was actually happening inside the house. And I think we came actually through the neighborhood we're in now. Jackie was just driving through. I think she had come over here for work or something and wanted to like show this neighborhood to me, like, oh, let's go see St. Anne's Hill. You got to go see it. And we're driving through and seeing all this stuff. And it just felt like the type of neighborhood that you can't get into. It just felt like that neighborhood that people just don't leave. Like, you love being in this historical neighborhood. Everybody owns a house. There's no rentals. You know, there's a lot of those neighborhoods out there where if you want a historic house, you can't rent in that neighborhood. You got to go buy when something just happens to open up. But through our house search, we eventually like just stumbled upon this listing on Zillow. And I look at the location and I was like, hey, that's in St. Anne's Hill. Like, Jack, like there's a house in the neighborhood that we drove through that we like we got to go check it out.
And we decided on this home because it really checked like all of the boxes. It had enough space. It was really cute and updated. We just wanted like, you know, a nice appliance package, you know, maybe a dishwasher, because we haven't had a dishwasher in like 3 years. When we saw this space, it checked every box. Convenience, walkable to so many things, off the bus line if in case we ever need to catch a bus, the affordability and updates, you know, and the landlord is so lovely. Like, we don't talk about that enough, but he's a super lovely family guy. So it just made everything very comfortable.
So we started really focusing around, you know, what's the best neighborhood for us? Where do we want to be? What's going to be close enough to downtown? What's going to be walkable? What has amenities that we can kind of look to? And then base that off of, you know, okay, what's the best house in that area for us? I do think we hit a little bit of a jackpot in that, you know, granted, this house is not perfect, but it's been taken care of and it's been renovated and it's continuing to be taken care of by a great landlord. So like, there's just so much here that it makes up for maybe the small things we might miss in a particular house. So yeah, I would say that mindset shift is really about, okay, how do we get in the best neighborhood and the best house we can find in that neighborhood rather than getting in the biggest house, you know, regardless of where the neighborhood is.
Moving to Mexico just really shed the light of what a neighborhood really could be and what a community could feel like when you have everything within a 6-block radius.
So like we always kind of wanted a little bit of that closeness. And I think once we got to Mexico and our last place that we lived was like really walkable. You could just go downstairs and there was a corner store and a chiropractor and doctors and a pharmacy, and just like there was a lot kind of in that area. Kind of bringing that back to the US, we started thinking about, okay, if we want to be in a walkable community, a lot of times that means living downtown in the area. Or if you get lucky, you find a place that's right next to a shopping center. So like we were really started looking for, okay, what are the areas we want to be in town? What do those areas kind of have as far as walkability? So we don't have to always be relying on a car. You know, gas prices going insanely crazy at this moment. So like that kind of comes into mind too, of like, what can I go get without having to put gas in my car? So there's always sort of this ongoing theme of like, how can we get closer to the things that we need in our day-to-day life and be able to kind of walk and go get them. The catalyst for that mind shift change, I think, came from probably years before it even happened. I know Jackie was always talking about like wanting to be in a walkable community, being close to things. You know, I did live in a walkable community for a little while in Charlotte, where basically we were in an apartment complex right behind the shopping center. So that then becomes walkable.
But we also just wanted the neighborhood to be what we wanted it to be, you know. Oftentimes we've gotten the best house in the worst neighborhood, or a couple of blocks have been a little sketchy, but this time we decided to go for a really developed neighborhood.
I think we also wanted a community that was closer to downtown, closer to where the things were happening, where stuff was going on. As well as, you know, Jackie doesn't work at home, she works out of the house, so being something that's close to her place of employment would be, you know, helpful as well. I think the location we found has a lot of those things in it. You know, we can walk into downtown. I can walk over to 2nd Street Market and get things out of 2nd Street Market.
So we have restaurants, we have bakeries, the, you know, 1 block away from, you know, gas stations and little, you know, little convenience stores or whatever, close to the highway.
So even, you know, yesterday morning, I got up, Jackie's fixing breakfast. I could go around the corner to the cafe, you know, be able to go get some sweets in the morning, just walk around the corner and get that, and come back to the house and be able to complete the breakfast, which is like an eye-opening experience of like, hey, this is the way I really want to live.
I'm attracted to old neighborhoods and buildings. It's so weird. In all honesty, it reminded me of an old historic neighborhood I used to work in downtown Baltimore called Fells Point. It reminds me of Fells Point. It's something about these old neighborhoods. They're either dilapidated and torn and worn, or they have a really beautiful patina, if you will, and they've aged well, and the community just makes sure to take care of it. They take care of each other, and cute little parks and things like that, and that's what St. Anne's Hill is.
It's known as historic St. Anne's Hill, and it's a little bit more, I guess, taken care of than some of the other historical neighborhoods. It feels like people never left. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe people left and came back. There's definitely like we have our neighbors who actually were born in this neighborhood and came back to it. Well, never left the neighborhood, I should say, not came back to it. So it definitely has sort of a mature, lived in, didn't feel like it went through some of the demolition phases that some of the other neighborhoods have kind of felt like they'd gone through. And there's also just, you know, local restaurants, cafes, shopping. It's a good self-sustained neighborhood where you don't necessarily have to leave. There's also an art school here. I feel like any town I've ever been into, like around the art school, there's always sort of a nicer neighborhood. Like there's something here that makes the neighborhood preservable. Like sometimes you have a whole historic neighborhood, there's nothing but houses, and if people leave, there's nothing there to kind of anchor it. Whereas like there's school here, there's a German club, there's I think the Board of Education has some buildings here. So like just being in the neighborhood, there are some anchors here that are going to like provide some foundation that are going to keep the city investing in this particular community. This house I found through my many ways of locating properties. Definitely looking at Zillow and Redfin. Also, like, landlords don't answer Zillow and Redfin emails and messages. So like you have to go to the specific property management company. You try and find, you know, the name of the landlord on Zillow, and maybe you can find some other ways you can kind of contact them. So like this one was pretty easy. Contacted through Zillow. He actually answered back. We were able to do everything through Zillow. We pay our rent through Zillow. It was actually somebody who actually used the Zillow platform to its fullest capacity, which was nice. But this one was pretty easy to kind of locate. Just kind of came along at the right time. So like as you come into the house, it just felt like it was home. It was small, it was cozy, but there were, you know, curved archways in the doors. There was, you know, fireplaces, and it was laid out like there was an open concept for the kitchen and dining area. There were like little weird in-between spaces that didn't necessarily have a good definition to them, which always feels like a place for you to do something special in the house. It's different when you have sort of a cookie cutter space where it's like, you know, okay, hallway, bedroom, 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 hallway, and like everything is just already set out for its purpose and there's no wasted space. Like in older houses, there are some wasted spaces. You know, the way this old house was chopped up into pieces, like there just ends up being these weird spaces that don't quite fit. So you kind of find ways to make those spaces personal, unique, identifiable for whatever purpose you find them for.
Well, ain't this charming? It's just so cute and comfortable. It felt like home as we walked in. It really felt good walking in and looked good, and we got along really nicely, you know, even with the landlord, you know. And I like things that are happy coincidences. I don't believe in coincidence, but so I call them happy, just to so y'all know what I'm talking about. But I really do think the Lord, you know, opened up the opportunity for us. And the landlord's name is my brother's name, and you know, just a lot of things were connecting along the way. And it's like, oh, I think we're supposed to be here. Thank you, Lord. No matter where we've lived, once we really grew up into our design aesthetics, we were really all in for decorating and pictures and, you know, and all the decor and knickknacks and bric-a-brac and all that. And so when we saw this space, we looked at it, we stepped back like, oh, I like that arch. Oh, okay. I like the way these walls are situated. And oh, okay. I like that. I like that. Okay. This room and how it's already painted. Okay. That'll be the studio. So literally as we were walking through the space, we actually started to you know, talk out loud, like, okay, what would you do with this space? What would you do with that space? Really, every room, every wall we looked at, we were like, okay, this is how we can use it, and this is how it should be used.
Every home searches its own winding road. So glad you stayed for this journey of ours. Next time, the narrative moves inside. Join us as we reveal the inspiration and intent behind our living room design. Until we speak again, we'll be finding our style, finding our peace, finding home again.